September 7th, 562 BCE. Babylon. As the first light of dawn spreads across the Euphrates River, King Nebuchadnezzar II stands alone atop his palace terrace, gazing down upon a city that no longer merely exists on the earth, but dominates it. A city of walls so vast they swallow the horizon, of gates that shimmer like gemstones, of towers that claw upward toward the realm of the gods themselves. And as the city awakens beneath him, priests moving through shadowed courtyards, merchants unbolting wooden stalls, soldiers shifting spears along the ramparts, Nebuchadnezzar does not see streets or temples or people. He sees memory, ambition, and destiny fused into brick and stone. Because Babylon is not simply his capital, it is his answer to history, his defiance of oblivion, and his offering to the divine. He was born into a world where Babylon was a wounded city, humiliated by Assyrian domination, scarred by conquest and sacrilege, a city once so thoroughly destroyed by Sennacherib in 689 BCE that its canals were diverted to drown its ruins and its gods declared powerless. Yet Babylon endured, and when Nebuchadnezzar was a boy in the 7th century BCE, he grew up listening to stories not of triumph, but of survival, of a people who remembered who they were, even when the world tried to erase them. And it was his father, Nabopolassar, who dared to ignite rebellion in 626 BCE, exploiting the fractures of a collapsing Assyrian empire, forging alliances with the Medes, and marching toward vengeance with fire and steel, until in 612 BCE, the great city of Nineveh fell in an orgy of destruction so complete that even the rivers seemed to swallow its memory. And with Assyria gone, the world tilted. Power vacuums opened, and new empires rushed to fill the void. Among them, Egypt, whose pharaoh Necho II marched north, believing Babylon still weak, still secondary, still provincial. And it was there at Carchemish in 605 BCE that Nebuchadnezzar, still a prince, stood before the armies of Egypt on the banks of the Euphrates, commanding Babylonian forces with a ferocity and precision that shattered Egyptian ambitions forever. A victory so decisive that ancient records reduce it to a single brutal line: he annihilated them. And in that moment, Babylon ceased to be a survivor and became the center of gravity for the entire Near East. Yet even as the battlefield cooled, messengers arrived with news that would redefine Nebuchadnezzar's life. His father was dead, the throne was vacant, and the empire fragile, forcing Nebuchadnezzar into a desperate race across deserts and rivers to secure his crown before rivals could rise. And when he entered Babylon and was crowned king, he inherited not merely a realm, but a responsibility to ensure that Babylon would never again kneel to anyone, ever. And so his reign became a relentless fusion of war and construction, conquest and creation, because Nebuchadnezzar understood something fundamental about power, that fear conquers quickly, but stone endures. And so his armies marched again and again westward into the Levant, laying siege to Jerusalem in 597 BCE and again in 587 BCE. When the city was destroyed, Solomon's temple burned, and thousands were dragged into exile, an act remembered in Hebrew scripture as divine punishment and trauma, yet in Babylonian inscriptions remembered as order imposed upon chaos. And the spoils of these wars did not rot in treasuries. They were transformed into walls, temples, palaces, canals, and gates, into a city so colossal that it defied comprehension. Double walls wide enough for chariots to race, moats fed by the Euphrates itself, processional roads paved in stone, palaces layered upon palaces like geological strata of ambition. And at the heart of it all stood Marduk, chief god of Babylon, whose favor Nebuchadnezzar believed had lifted him from obscurity to supremacy. And to honor Marduk, he would rebuild the Etemenanki, the ancient ziggurat, whose name meant the foundation of heaven and earth. A structure whose earlier incarnations had risen and fallen for centuries, but had never achieved the scale Nebuchadnezzar envisioned, because this time it would not merely symbolize cosmic order, it would dominate the skyline of the world, constructed of baked brick and bitumen, its base stretching nearly 300 feet across, its 7 ascending levels rising like a man-made mountain from the flat Mesopotamian plain, visible from miles away. A stairway not for men, but for gods, culminating in a sacred shrine accessible only to priests. And for Nebuchadnezzar, this was not an act of arrogance, but devotion, not defiance of heaven, but alignment with it, a declaration that Babylon was chosen, that its king ruled not by chance, but by divine mandate. Yet as travelers and exiles passed through Babylon's gates, awe often mingled with dread, because such scale unsettled the human spirit. Greek visitors would later describe the city without exaggeration, calling its walls impossible and its splendor unreal. While among the Judean captives forced to live beneath the shadow of the tower, stories began to circulate of an ancient rebellion against God, of a tower built to reach heaven and punished by confusion and scattering, a memory that would later crystallize into the story of the Tower of Babel, transforming Babylon in collective memory from a city of divine order into a warning against hubris. Yet in Nebuchadnezzar's lifetime, the tower still rose incomplete, perpetually under construction, a reminder that even the greatest ambitions are never truly finished. And as the morning sun climbs higher over the Euphrates on this day in 562 BCE, the king feels the strange weight of absolute power. Because there are no enemies left worthy of his armies, no rivals strong enough to challenge his throne. And history teaches that such moments are the most dangerous of all, for empires do not fall when they are weak, but when they believe themselves eternal. And as drums begin to echo from the temple district below, signaling the start of dedication rites, Nebuchadnezzar turns from the city he has reshaped and moves toward the stairway, unaware that his name will outlive his empire, that Babylon's bricks will one day crumble to dust, and that the city which touched the sky will become a legend, a warning, and a ruin whispered through time. The drums that echoed through Babylon that morning were not merely instruments of ceremony. They were the heartbeat of an empire announcing itself to the heavens. As Nebuchadnezzar descended from his palace terrace toward the processional way, the city aligned itself for ritual. For Babylon did not worship quietly or privately. It worshipped in public, in stone, in spectacle, because belief here was not a matter of faith alone, but of order, and order was the difference between civilization and the chaos that once swallowed the world. The date was still September 562 BCE, and this was the season of renewal, when gods were paraded through streets designed not just for movement, but for meaning, when the city itself became a stage and its king the chief actor, moving at the intersection of human authority and divine will, because in Babylon there was no clean separation between the two. The processional way stretched ahead, a wide avenue paved in limestone slabs, its sides lined with walls adorned with reliefs of lions, each one molded in brilliant glazed brick, their mouths open, muscles tense, frozen in eternal motion, symbols of Ishtar, goddess of war and love, whose favor was as unpredictable as it was essential. And as Nebuchadnezzar passed beneath the towering Ishtar gate, its blue surface shimmering like captured sky, he was not simply walking through architecture, he was walking through theology, through a physical narrative that declared Babylon the center of the cosmos and its king the steward of divine balance. Beyond the gate, the city expanded outward in layers of function and hierarchy, temples clustered near the sacred core, markets and workshops radiating beyond, residential districts stretching toward the outer walls, all connected by canals that carried water, grain, and commerce, for Babylon was not sustained by miracles, but by administration, by scribes who counted, priests who calendared, engineers who regulated the Euphrates, and laborers, free and unfree, who baked millions of bricks stamped with Nebuchadnezzar's name, each one a declaration of ownership, each one a message to the future that this city had been shaped by a single will. The dedication rites that day were not merely symbolic acknowledgments of completed construction, but reaffirmations of cosmic order, because the Babylonian worldview was built on the idea that the universe itself was fragile, constantly threatened by chaos, and that the gods relied on human kings to maintain balance through correct ritual and monumental action. And nowhere was this belief more concentrated than in the annual Akitu traditions, when statues of the gods were moved from their temples, paraded through the streets and symbolically reaffirmed their covenant with Babylon, a city chosen not by chance but by divine preference. To outsiders, this might have appeared as pageantry or superstition, but to the Babylonians it was existential necessity, for without these rites the gods might withdraw their favor, and without divine favor, floods would come unrestrained, crops would fail, enemies would rise, and the world would slip backward into the formless darkness from which it had once emerged. At the center of this fragile balance stood Marduk, the supreme god of Babylon, a deity who had risen alongside the city itself, absorbing the roles and authority of older gods until he became not just a patron, but a cosmic ruler, the one who had defeated chaos at the dawn of time and established order through strength and wisdom. And it was Marduk who legitimized Nebuchadnezzar's rule, not merely as king, but as caretaker of the universe's stability. The Edamananki Tower, rising above the city, was built not to challenge heaven, but to anchor it, to serve as a cosmic axis connecting the realms of gods and men, and its very presence declared that Babylon was not simply a political capital, but a metaphysical one, the point where the structure of the universe was renewed year after year. Yet the magnificence of Babylon masked an uncomfortable truth, one that Nebuchadnezzar himself understood even if he rarely acknowledged it openly. Empires of such scale require immense human cost, and beneath the blue-glazed gates and towering temples lived hundreds of thousands whose labor sustained the illusion of divine harmony. Babylon was a city of immigrants, captives, artisans, traders, and exiles, its population swollen by conquest, its streets echoing with languages from across the Near East, Akkadian, Aramaic, Hebrew, Elamite, and others now lost to time, creating a polyglot reality that contradicted the image of perfect order projected by royal inscriptions. Among these people were the Judean exiles, displaced from their homeland after the destruction of Jerusalem, settled in communities along Babylonian canals, allowed to live and work, yet never allowed to forget why they were there. And for them, Babylon was not a chosen city, but a prison of gold, a place where the gods of others reigned supreme and their own identity was constantly at risk of dissolution. It is within this tension between Babylon's self-image as divinely ordained and the lived experience of those it absorbed that the seeds of future myth were planted, because stories grow most powerfully where power is most uneven, and the towering ziggurat that Nebuchadnezzar saw as an act of devotion would be remembered by others as a symbol of arrogance, a city that believed itself eternal and therefore untouchable. Even within Babylon itself, cracks were forming, though they were subtle, almost invisible to a king at the height of his authority. Because while Nebuchadnezzar ruled with confidence and competence, his empire depended heavily on his personal presence, his ability to command loyalty from generals, priests, and governors spread across vast distances. And such systems, no matter how well constructed, are always vulnerable to time. As the rituals concluded and the gods were symbolically returned to their sanctuaries, the city exhaled, the drums fell silent, and life resumed its rhythms. But beneath the surface, the forces that would one day undo Babylon were already in motion. Economic strain from constant building projects, political resentment among subject peoples, and the simple inevitability that no king, no matter how powerful, lives forever. Nebuchadnezzar would reign for several more years after this day, dying in 562 BCE, leaving behind a city unmatched in splendor and an empire that seemed unassailable. Yet his death would mark not the continuation of stability, but the beginning of uncertainty, because Babylon's greatness had been built around a single towering figure, and once that figure was gone, the question would no longer be how high the city could rise, but how long it could remain standing. The gods had walked Babylon's streets that day, carried in ritual procession and honored with incense and song, but history, indifferent and patient, was already approaching the gates.
When Nebuchadnezzar II died in the late summer of 562 BCE, Babylon did not collapse in fire or flood, and that silence was itself deceptive, because the most dangerous moments in history are often the quiet ones, the pauses between thunderclaps, when a great system continues to function even though the force holding it together has vanished. The king was buried with ritual and reverence, his name already carved into countless bricks, his image woven into the identity of the city itself. And for a brief moment it seemed as though Babylon might continue as it always had, immense, confident, divinely protected. Yet beneath the surface, something had shifted irreversibly, because Nebuchadnezzar had not merely ruled Babylon, he had contained it, balancing priests against generals, governors against scribes, gods against men. And without him, the machinery of empire still turned, but it no longer knew precisely where it was going. His son, Marduk, inherited the throne, and from the beginning it was clear that he was not his father, not in temperament, not in authority, and certainly not in myth. Because in Babylon, legitimacy was not guaranteed by blood alone. It was earned through visible strength, ritual correctness, and the ability to command fear as well as loyalty. Marduk ruled for only 2 years, from 562 to 560 BCE, and later Babylonian sources speak of him with thinly veiled contempt, describing him as erratic, inattentive to tradition, and dangerously indulgent. And while some of this may be propaganda written by his enemies, the outcome speaks for itself, because in 560 BCE he was assassinated by his brother-in-law, Neriglissar, a military man who understood that in Babylon, power flowed most reliably from the army and the priesthood, not from royal lineage alone. Neriglissar attempted to stabilize the empire by returning to familiar patterns, funding temple restorations, reaffirming religious rights, and leading military campaigns against lingering threats. But his reign, too, was short, ending in 556 BCE, and what followed was a rapid descent into instability that no amount of ritual or construction could disguise. His young son, Marduk, ruled for only a matter of months before being overthrown, possibly murdered, by a group of elites who decided that Babylon required a stronger hand. And it was in this vacuum that one of the most consequential and misunderstood figures in Babylonian history emerged, Nabonidus, a man who was not of the traditional royal line, whose rise itself signaled that the old structures were failing. Nabonidus was deeply religious, but his devotion unsettled Babylon because it was not centered on Marduk, the city's supreme god, but on Sin, the moon god, whose cult was strongest far from Babylon's heart. And from the moment Nabonidus ascended the throne, fractures widened between king and priesthood, between tradition and innovation, because in a city where theology and governance were inseparable, changing the focus of worship was not a personal preference, it was a political act with cosmic implications. Nabonidus restored temples, yes, but not always the ones Babylon expected. And in doing so, he alienated the powerful Marduk priesthood, whose influence had shaped the city for centuries and whose cooperation was essential to maintaining the illusion that Babylon remained divinely favored. Then, in a decision that stunned the empire, Nabonidus did something no Babylonian king had done before. He left. For nearly a decade, he resided in Timah, an oasis city deep in northern Arabia, far from Babylon, far from its rituals, far from its political heart, leaving governance in the hands of his son, Belshazzar, whose name would later echo through biblical tradition as a symbol of doomed excess. This absence was catastrophic because Babylonian kings were not meant to rule at a distance. They were meant to be physically present, to perform rites, to lead festivals, to embody the city's relationship with the gods. And without the king, the Akitu festival could not be properly conducted. The renewal of cosmic order left incomplete year after year, and slowly, subtly, confidence began to erode. To the priests, this was sacrilege. To the people, it was unsettling. To Babylon's rivals, it was opportunity. While Babylon turned inward, fractured by religious disagreement and leadership vacuum, a new power was rising to the east, one that watched patiently and learned from the failures of others, a power that did not announce itself with towering ziggurats or divine proclamations, but with discipline, strategy, and an understanding of human psychology: Persia. In the highlands of modern-day Iran, Cyrus II, later known as Cyrus the Great, was forging a different kind of empire, one built not solely on terror or monumentality, but on calculated tolerance and political pragmatism, absorbing conquered peoples rather than erasing them, presenting himself not as a destroyer of gods, but as their restorer. And as Babylon weakened internally, Cyrus advanced westward, defeating the Medes, absorbing Lydia, and positioning himself as an inevitable force rather than an invading menace. By the time Cyrus turned his attention towards Mesopotamia, Babylon was still immense, still wealthy, still defended by walls that had once seemed impregnable. But its greatest vulnerability was no longer military, it was psychological, because the belief that Babylon was eternal, chosen, untouchable, had begun to crack. The gods had not abandoned the city in fire or plague, but in silence. And when belief falters, empires follow. As the years passed, Nabonidus returned to Babylon too late to repair the damage, attempting to reconcile with the priesthood and reassert authority. But the trust was gone, and whispers spread through temples and markets alike that Marduk had withdrawn his favor, that Babylon's king no longer understood his role, and perhaps the gods were preparing a change. When Persian forces finally approached Babylon in 539 BCE, they did not face a united city roaring defiance. They faced a population divided, disillusioned, and uncertain. And it is here, on the edge of invasion, that Babylon's story pivots from dominance to destiny, from the city that touched the sky to the city about to be taken without a siege.
On the night of October 12th, 539 BCE, Babylon was not a city bracing for conquest, it was a city celebrating itself. Inside its walls, torches flickered against glazed brick, music drifted through palace corridors, and wine flowed freely among nobles who believed, with absolute confidence, that no army on earth could breach Babylon's defenses. The Euphrates still ran through the heart of the city, the walls still stood colossal and unbroken, and the gods, so it was believed, still resided in their sanctuaries. To Babylon's elite, the idea that Persia posed a serious threat bordered on absurdity. Cyrus and his forces were outsiders, nomads by Babylonian standards, men without towers, without ancient temples, without divine pedigree, and so as the city feasted, it did so not in ignorance of danger, but in contempt for it. At the center of this night stood Belshazzar, son of Nabonidus, acting king in his father's absence, hosting a lavish banquet within the palace complex, a feast that later tradition would immortalize as a symbol of arrogance, but which in reality reflected something more dangerous than pride: detachment. Babylon's leadership had become insulated from the world beyond its walls, convinced that ritual and reputation alone could substitute for vigilance. And as Belshazzar raised sacred vessels taken decades earlier from the destroyed Temple of Jerusalem, drinking wine and invoking Babylonian gods over the spoils of conquered faiths, the act was not merely sacrilegious, it was revealing, a final expression of a ruling class that no longer understood the fragility of the order it inherited. Outside the walls, under cover of darkness, Persian forces moved with precision and patience, executing a plan that relied not on brute force, but on intelligence, engineering, and Babylon's own complacency. Because Cyrus had learned what Babylon's kings had forgotten, that walls are only as strong as the will behind them. Persian engineers diverted the Euphrates upstream, lowering the river level enough for troops to wade beneath the city's river gates, gates that were carelessly left unsecured, either through negligence or internal betrayal. And while Babylon feasted, the enemy entered silently, not as an invading horde, but as a shadow slipping through an unlocked door. There was no great battle in the streets, no heroic last stand on the walls, no inferno consuming the city's monuments, because Babylon did not fall through destruction, it fell through surrender, through the collapse of confidence, through the quiet realization among many of its inhabitants that resistance was unnecessary, perhaps even undesirable. Ancient sources suggest that significant portions of the population welcomed the Persians, seeing in Cyrus not a destroyer but a liberator, a ruler who promised stability without humiliation, continuity without chaos, and above all, respect for local traditions that Babylon's own king had neglected.
By dawn, the city that had once commanded the world was under Persian control, its gates intact, its temples untouched, its people largely unharmed. And when Cyrus entered Babylon days later, he did so not as a conqueror dripping in blood, but as a king performing ritual, honoring Marduk, and presenting himself as the rightful restorer of order. A narrative so effective that it was carved into clay on what we now call the Cyrus cylinder, proclaiming that Babylon's gods themselves had chosen him to rule because Nabonidus had failed in his duties. For Babylon, this was not the end in the way cities usually end. It was not annihilation, not abandonment, but it was the end of supremacy, the moment when the city ceased to be the axis of history and became instead a jewel within someone else's crown. The walls still stood, Beetaminanki still arose above the skyline, the processional way still guided festivals, but the meaning of these structures had changed irrevocably, because Babylon was no longer the source of power. It was a symbol to be managed, preserved, and ultimately surpassed. Cyrus allowed exiled peoples, including the Judeans, to return home, reversing policies that Babylon had once used to control its empire, and in doing so he rewrote the moral narrative of conquest, casting Babylon not as a glorious capital fallen to barbarism, but as a proud city corrected by a more enlightened ruler, a perception that would echo through history and scripture alike. Yet beneath this veneer of mercy lay a deeper transformation, because under Persian rule, Babylon's political centrality diminished steadily, administrative functions shifted elsewhere, and while the city remained wealthy and culturally influential, it no longer dictated the course of empires, it reacted to them. The night Babylon fell was quiet, almost anticlimactic, but that silence was its true tragedy. Because the city that once reshaped the world did not die screaming, it faded, absorbed into a system larger than itself, its greatness preserved but neutralized, its towers still touching the sky even as their purpose drifted out of reach. And in that quiet surrender lies one of history's most unsettling lessons, that the most powerful civilizations often fall not when they are weakest, but when they no longer believe they can fall at all.
Babylon did not vanish when its gates opened to Cyrus in 539 BCE, and that fact alone complicates everything we think we know about the fall of empires. Because history often teaches us to expect firestorms and final screams, but Babylon endured in a different way. Lingering on through centuries of foreign rule, its streets still walked, its temples still standing, its name still heavy with meaning, even as the power that once animated it slipped quietly into the past. Under Persian rule, Babylon remained one of the empire's most important cities, not as a capital of conquest, but as a prize of legitimacy, because to rule Babylon was to inherit its ancient authority, and Cyrus understood this better than anyone, carefully presenting himself not as a conqueror who had broken the city, but as a chosen restorer who had saved it from impiety and neglect. The Persians did not strip Babylon of its gods or dismantle its monuments. Instead, they preserved them, repaired them, and folded them into a broader imperial system that stretched from the Indus Valley to the Aegean Sea, making Babylon less singular but more connected than ever before. Administratively, the city became a satrapal center, its scribes still producing tablets, its priests still conducting rituals, its astronomer priests still watching the skies and recording planetary movements with a precision unmatched anywhere else in the ancient world. Because even in political decline, Babylon remained a powerhouse of knowledge, quietly shaping the intellectual foundations of future civilizations. Yet beneath this surface continuity, something essential had changed, because Babylon was no longer sovereign, no longer the axis around which history turned. And for a city that had defined itself through centrality and supremacy, this loss was existential. Persian kings came and went, some respectful, others less so. And while Cyrus had been welcomed, later rulers would test Babylon's patience, particularly Xerxes I, who faced revolts in the early 5th century BCE and responded with force, reportedly damaging temples and suppressing traditional privileges, actions that struck at the heart of Babylonian identity and accelerated the erosion of its special status within the empire. With each generation, Babylon became more symbolic than strategic, more remembered than decisive,
and as trade routes shifted and new capitals rose elsewhere, the city's economic vitality slowly drained away, not through catastrophe, but through neglect. Still, Babylon refused to die completely, clinging to relevance through culture and memory. And it was in this twilight state that another world-conquering figure entered its story, Alexander of Macedon. When Alexander marched into Babylon in 331 BCE after defeating Darius III at Gaugamela, he did not treat the city as a relic, but as a future, envisioning it as the capital of his vast unifying empire, ordering repairs to temples, planning restorations of the Etemenanki, and embracing Babylonian customs in ways that unsettled his own followers. For a brief moment, it seemed as though Babylon might rise again, reborn as the heart of a new world order, blending Greek and Mesopotamian traditions into something unprecedented. But history, relentless in its irony, intervened once more. In 323 BCE, Alexander died in Babylon, struck down not by enemy blades, but by illness, ambition, and exhaustion. And with his death died the last realistic chance for Babylon's revival as a true center of power. The empire fractured almost immediately, his generals tearing it apart in wars of succession, and Babylon once again found itself caught between greater forces, passed from hand to hand, valued for its legacy, but no longer invested in as a living capital. Over the following centuries, the city's population dwindled, its canals silted, its great monuments fell into disrepair, and the Etemenanki, once a cosmic axis linking heaven and earth, was dismantled brick by brick, its materials reused for other buildings, its purpose forgotten, until nothing remained but a mound of rubble and memory. By the time Roman authors wrote about Babylon, it was already a shadow, a place of legend rather than life, its name evoking grandeur and decadence rather than political reality. And yet even in ruin, Babylon's influence endured, embedded in religious texts, legal traditions, astronomical knowledge, and cultural myths that shaped civilizations far removed from the banks of the Euphrates. Babylon became more powerful in memory than it ever had been in life, transformed into a symbol that could mean many things at once: the height of human achievement, the danger of arrogance, the fragility of power, the tension between order and chaos. And this symbolic afterlife ensured that Babylon would never truly disappear. Empires that followed borrowed its language, its imagery, its fears, and its lessons, invoking Babylon as either a model to emulate or a warning to heed. And in doing so, they kept it alive long after its streets fell silent. The city that touched the sky did not fall in a single night, nor did it vanish in a single century. It faded across generations, eroded by time, politics, and shifting belief, until what remained was not stone, but story. And perhaps that is Babylon's final triumph, that even in ruin, it continued to shape how humanity understands power, ambition, and the cost of believing oneself chosen by the gods.
By the dawn of the first millennium BCE, Babylon had already become more than a city. It was a symbol, a legend, a cautionary tale whispered across empires, yet still very real beneath the dust and weeds that now crept along its streets. Travelers who passed through the ruins centuries later marveled at the sheer scale of what once was, the remains of double walls so wide a chariot could gallop along them, the blue-glazed fragments of the Ishtar Gate that still shimmered in the sun, and the remnants of the processional way, where lions and dragons immortalized in brick had once paraded the power of kings and gods alike. Even in decay, Babylon's presence was overwhelming because it had been designed to dominate perception as much as the earth, a city whose every corner proclaimed human ambition intertwined with divine sanction. The Etemenanki, though reduced to rubble, remained an emblem, a stairway that once reached for heaven, now broken, yet still capable of inspiring awe in those who understood its former height and purpose. For centuries, scribes, priests, and storytellers recorded Babylon not simply as a city of bricks and canals, but as a theater of human aspiration, ambition, and hubris. And it was in these narratives, ranging from Babylonian inscriptions to Greek historians like Herodotus, that the city achieved a sort of immortality,
a life beyond politics and warfare. In Greek imagination, Babylon became a marvel and a warning, a city of unparalleled luxury and ingenuity, yet also of decadence and moral hazard, a place where kings raised towers to challenge the heavens and paid the price, where wealth could not protect a ruler from time or fate. And yet, even as these legends circulated, Babylon persisted in the world in a practical sense. It remained an economic hub along the Euphrates, a center for trade routes connecting Persia, Arabia, and the Mediterranean, its warehouses still filled with grain, its workshops producing textiles, its scribes managing accounts for rulers far away. Its temples, though no longer as politically potent, still served communities and preserved astronomical and mathematical knowledge that would influence scholars for centuries, because Babylonian understanding of the heavens, its calendars, observations, and calculations was unrivaled, forming the basis for systems that endured into the Hellenistic period and beyond. The city's resilience was not limited to physical structures or economic activity. It was cultural and intellectual, embedded in the rhythms of life, in the rituals, in the memory of peoples who called it home or passed through, whether they were Babylonians, Persians, Greeks, or later Parthians. Each generation added layers of meaning and narrative, transforming Babylon from a mere city into a touchstone of human imagination, a lens through which the ambitions and failures of kings could be measured. And yet, for all its endurance, the city could not escape the slow erosion of history. Earthquakes, floods, and neglect gradually silenced the canals, collapsed walls, and buried once proud temples beneath sand and silt, while new cities arose elsewhere, shifting the center of power along rivers and trade routes that flowed beyond Babylon's reach. By the time the Parthians held sway in Mesopotamia, Babylon had lost its former glory. It existed, yes, but it was no longer the beating heart of empires, merely a revered relic, a monument to what once was. And in that slow fading lies a haunting lesson. The city that once touched the sky did not fall in a single battle, did not burn in a single campaign. It was slowly absorbed into history, a victim not of violence, but of the relentless passage of time, of shifting priorities, and of human ambition moving elsewhere, seeking new centers, new towers to raise, new empires to imprint upon the world. Yet the legend of Babylon remained, growing in the telling, amplified in the scriptures of multiple faiths, embedded in Greek and later Roman thought, referenced as a city of unparalleled magnificence, luxury, and divine challenge. And through these stories it achieved an immortality far greater than any stone or brick could provide. For those who walked its streets, who breathed its air when life still pulsed through its canals, Babylon was a home, a power, a civilization. For those who read of it centuries later, it became a mirror, reflecting the human desire to reach higher than the earth allows, to create something that touches the divine, and to assert permanence in a world that refuses it. In every legend, in every fragment, in every whispered story across the centuries, Babylon refused to die. Because even as the dust settled on its streets, the memory of its walls, its towers, its gods, and its kings endured, echoing across time, reminding every civilization that would listen that human ambition, when fused with faith and fear, can rise higher than any empire before it, and that nothing, not even the tallest tower, can escape the inexorable force of history.
Long after the Persian Empire folded into the hands of Alexander's successors, and even after his death left Babylon without a central figure to champion it, the city's presence refused to fade completely. By the late Hellenistic period, Babylon was no longer the fulcrum of imperial power. It had become, paradoxically, both peripheral and central. A peripheral location for rulers who sought new capitals, yet central in the imagination of those who understood its history and its enduring influence. Its walls, though eroded by wind, flood, and neglect, still rose enough to inspire awe.
The processional way, once a thoroughfare of kings and gods, now bore only the footprints of travelers, merchants, and scholars who came not to witness empire, but to glimpse history. Scholars from distant lands marveled at the complexity of its urban planning, the remnants of its water systems, the layers of temples, and the traces of markets that had once thrived with an efficiency rivaling any city in the ancient world. Babylon was no longer the source of empire, but it was still a teacher. Even as the Seleucid rulers, successors of Alexander, shifted their focus to new centers like Seleucia on the Tigris, Babylon retained a kind of spectral authority. Priests still performed ritual, but these ceremonies now existed for memory as much as for the gods. The ziggurat, the once mighty Etemenanki, stood as a skeleton of its former glory. Its bricks had been looted over generations, yet the tower's imprint on the skyline remained unmistakable. Travelers who approached the city from the desert reported seeing it first, a jagged monument to human ambition, a beacon of what mankind could achieve when driven by faith, devotion, and a relentless will to dominate the natural and divine worlds alike. To the Hellenistic rulers who sought to legitimize their authority in Mesopotamia, Babylon was both opportunity and obligation, a city that demanded attention, reverence, and the acknowledgement of its symbolic power. Alexander himself had understood this. He had planned to make Babylon the center of his empire, commissioning repairs to temples, the palace, and most famously, the ziggurat. His untimely death in 323 BCE deprived the city of a ruler capable of executing his vision. Yet even in the absence of Alexander, Babylon's prestige remained a crucial bargaining chip among generals and kings who inherited fragments of his domain. It is in this period that Babylon began to be remembered not only as a city of kings, but as a crucible of human ambition and divine encounter. Greek historians like Diodorus Siculus, Strabo, and later Pliny the Elder chronicled its wonders in words meant to astonish and warn. Walls so vast that chariots could race atop them, gates glazed in vivid blues, lions carved in relief as if frozen mid-roar, and a tower said to reach the heavens. The city became larger in legend than it ever was in life, and as stories spread across the Mediterranean world, Babylon transcended geography to occupy a space in human consciousness, a symbol of splendor, decadence, and the peril of pride. This was no small achievement for a city whose political power had long dissipated. Herein lies the paradox of Babylon. It had ceased to command armies, yet it continued to command imagination. It had lost control of empires, yet it dominated myth. Meanwhile, the physical reality of the city continued its slow decline. The canals that had once fed crops and carried grain across the empire were gradually neglected, clogged by silt and debris, transforming vibrant streets into marshy passages. Floods from the Euphrates, once harnessed as tools of irrigation and protection, now damaged homes and temples, and without central authority to maintain them, Babylon became vulnerable to the very elements it had once mastered. Scholars today suggest that by the early 1st century BCE, large portions of the city had been abandoned. The population, once estimated at hundreds of thousands at its peak under Nebuchadnezzar, had dwindled to a fraction of that number, clustered around remaining water sources and temples. Yet even diminished, the city remained impressive. Travelers described walls still standing hundreds of feet high, gates still bearing remnants of lion reliefs, and the occasional monument that recalled a civilization capable of extraordinary ambition. In this twilight of Babylon's life, the city's intellectual and religious significance persisted. Its priests continued to observe the stars, producing records of celestial movements that would inform later astronomy in the Greek and Hellenistic worlds. Babylonian mathematics, with its base 60 system and geometric precision, continued to influence scholars far beyond Mesopotamia. Temples remained centers of learning as well as devotion, preserving rituals, liturgies, and hymns that connected the living to a long chain of ancestors, kings, and gods. For those who lived in Babylon at this time, the city was not simply ruins, it was an inheritance, a repository of memory, a sacred geography in which the divine and human intertwined in ways that continued to shape daily life. The city's symbolic weight was magnified by the persistent narratives of catastrophe and hubris. The biblical story of the Tower of Babel, though written centuries earlier, had become more widely disseminated, associating Babylon with arrogance and the defiance of the divine. Greek and Roman writers adopted and adapted these stories, emphasizing moral lessons for their audiences, the folly of challenging the gods, the dangers of excessive pride, and the impermanence of human ambition. In these retellings, Babylon became more than a historical city. It became a cultural lens through which empires assessed themselves. The ruins that travelers encountered were imbued with meaning, interpreted as evidence that even the mightiest human constructs could not endure forever. Yet amid decline, Babylon inspired resurgence and ambition. Seleucid kings attempted to restore parts of the city. Temples were repaired, canals cleared, and festivals revived. Coins and inscriptions commemorated rulers' attention to Babylon, linking their authority to its prestige. Even so, the city's political and economic centrality had shifted irreversibly. The focus of power migrated eastward to Seleucia and later Ctesiphon, leaving Babylon as a revered but secondary urban center. Its inhabitants adapted, sustaining life within the remaining walls, maintaining ritual, trade, and scholarship as best they could, while outsiders increasingly regarded Babylon as a monument rather than a metropolis. Over time, Babylon's decline became inseparable from its myth. In Jewish, Christian, and Islamic texts, Babylon was invoked as the archetype of human pride and divine judgment. In these traditions, its kings were often remembered less as historical figures than as embodiments of hubris, its towers as monuments to ambition punished by the heavens, and its fall as a cautionary tale for rulers and empires yet to come. The city became a mirror, reflecting the eternal tension between aspiration and mortality, between human ingenuity and the inexorable passage of time. Even when physical structures crumbled, Babylon persisted in the imagination, influencing architecture, literature, and cultural memory across millennia. By the early centuries of the Common Era, Babylon was largely abandoned, though not forgotten. Roman and later Arab travelers documented what remained: towering walls, remnants of palaces, and traces of canals. Over centuries, sand and silt buried much of the city, creating mounds that hid its former glory. Yet even these mounds were recognized as sacred and legendary sites. Scholars and explorers would return, attempting to uncover the material reality of a city that had lived in memory for centuries, while the symbolic Babylon continued to grow in importance across the wider world. Babylon's enduring influence is a testament to the power of human ambition intertwined with belief, a city that touched the sky not merely in stone and brick, but in imagination. From Nebuchadnezzar's towering ziggurats to Persian restorations, Hellenistic fascination, and eventual decay, Babylon's story is a meditation on the fragility of political power, the resilience of culture, and the eternal human desire to leave a mark upon the world. Even when silent, even when buried beneath centuries of sand, Babylon spoke to all who encountered it. A city of vision, of order and chaos, of faith and defiance, a place where the divine and human met, collided, and transformed one another, leaving a legacy that would outlast empires, kings, and even time itself.
By the time the Parthians held sway over Mesopotamia in the 1st centuries BCE, Babylon had already passed the peak of its political power, yet its presence remained both tangible and spectral,
a city whose stones and streets whispered memories of empires, kings, and gods long gone, a place where the physical decay of walls, temples, and towers coexisted with the undiminished grandeur of its legend. Travelers who approached from the west along the dusty caravan routes would see the mounds of collapsed buildings rising above the plains like jagged echoes of what had once been, and even before entering the city proper, one could sense the weight of centuries pressing down, as if Babylon itself had absorbed the ambitions, triumphs, and failures of every ruler who had walked its streets. Though the population had dwindled dramatically, it remained a living city in pockets, a city where priests maintained ritual, farmers and merchants eked out a livelihood, and scribes recorded the movements of the heavens with a meticulousness that still astonishes modern scholars. The canals, once the lifeblood of commerce and agriculture, were partially silted, some rerouted or abandoned entirely, leaving neighborhoods isolated and marshy. Yet where water still flowed, life persisted, and the surviving architecture hinted at the precision and ambition that had defined Babylon at its height. The remains of the Ishtar Gate, though weathered, continued to shine faintly under the sun, a reminder of the ceremonial grandeur that had once announced the city's supremacy to all who approached. Lions still graced the walls in faded relief, silent sentinels of a power that had once commanded empires, and the processional way, though cracked and overgrown, retained traces of the marble and limestone paving that had guided kings, priests, and gods through ceremonial triumphs. Even the Etemenanki, stripped of its upper levels and reduced to a fractured core, remained an unmistakable landmark, a skeletal stairway pointing to the heavens, a testament to human ambition in collision with the divine. Under Parthian administration, Babylon was no longer a capital in the political sense. Power had shifted to cities like Seleucia and Ctesiphon, yet the city retained strategic and symbolic importance. Administrators still sent reports along the Euphrates, scribes still produced records of tribute and trade, and the temples, though diminished in influence, continued to function as cultural anchors, preserving centuries of knowledge about astronomy, mathematics, and ritual practice. It was in this interplay of memory and reality, of enduring human activity amid ruins, that Babylon's paradoxical life was most evident. It was at once alive and dead, significant and marginal, a city whose walls no longer dictated the flow of empires, but whose legacy still shaped the ambitions and fears of rulers far beyond Mesopotamia. The Jewish, Christian, and later Islamic traditions continued to enshrine Babylon as a cautionary exemplar, a city whose height and splendor served as a warning against hubris, whose kings symbolized the peril of defying the divine, whose powers, whether literal or allegorical, reached too far and fell. And these narratives ensured that Babylon would remain a reference point in the moral and philosophical imagination for centuries to come. For the Parthians and their successors, Babylon was a resource to be preserved for its prestige, yet one whose political authority no longer mattered. Markets still functioned, artisans still worked, but the city had become a shadow of itself, its administrative power a relic rather than a force, its streets echoing with footsteps of the past as much as the present. And yet, even in decline, Babylon inspired awe and reverence. Pilgrims and travelers from across the Near East, the Mediterranean, and even farther afield journeyed to witness its monuments, to walk where kings had walked, to gaze upon the remnants of ziggurats and temples, to touch the stones that had borne the weight of imperial ambition. For these visitors, Babylon was more than a city. It was an experience of history incarnate, a tangible narrative of human aspiration, divine interaction, and the relentless passage of time. Greek and Roman writers continued to describe Babylon in terms that blended observation with myth, emphasizing its monumental scale, its legendary walls, its towers that had once reached toward the heavens, and its labyrinthine streets that had been said to confound outsiders. Stories circulated of immense wealth, of royal banquets, of ceremonies that summoned the gods themselves to witness the triumph of kings, of streets lined with lions and dragons cast in colored brick, of priests interpreting celestial signs with wisdom that rivaled the philosophers of Athens or Alexandria. These accounts were often exaggerated, filtered through imagination and second-hand reports, yet they preserved the aura of Babylon for future generations, creating an intellectual and cultural gravity that endured far longer than the city's political relevance. By this stage, Babylon had become a repository not only of physical history, but of collective memory, a touchstone for the human imagination, a canvas onto which empires projected their dreams and fears. Even as dynasties rose and fell, as new cities eclipsed it in political and economic significance, Babylon persisted as a symbol, a city of ambition, of divine engagement, of architectural daring, of human mortality and hubris. In the midst of this enduring reputation, natural forces continued to transform the city. Flooding from the Euphrates, long controlled through canals and levees under Nebuchadnezzar, now breached neglected embankments, depositing layers of silt over neighborhoods, eroding walls and reshaping the urban landscape. Earthquakes, though sporadic, toppled fragile structures, further accelerating the gradual disintegration of once mighty temples and palaces. Despite these challenges, the city adapted, its inhabitants making use of what remained, reconstructing portions of temples, repairing smaller structures, and sustaining the daily rhythms of life through ingenuity and communal effort. Babylon became a city of resilience as much as legend, enduring through a combination of human determination and the remnants of its monumental infrastructure, which continued to support habitation and ritual practice long after its peak. This interplay between ruin and continuity contributed to the city's dual identity as both living space and sacred relic, a place where the past was not merely remembered but inhabited. Its cultural and intellectual heritage continued to radiate outward. Astronomical observations recorded by Babylonian priests informed Greek and later Hellenistic astronomy, shaping calendars, planetary models, and mathematical methods that influenced civilizations for centuries. The base 60 numerical system developed in Babylon provided the foundation for measuring angles, time, and complex calculations that endure even today. These legacies underscored the city's extraordinary endurance, proving that Babylon's influence was not dependent solely on political dominance, but also on the intellectual and cultural structures it had built over centuries. Throughout these centuries of transition, travelers, historians, and scholars alike grappled with the contradictions of Babylon. How could a city so decayed retain such prestige? How could ruins inspire awe equal to that of fully functioning capitals? The answer lay in Babylon's exceptional history. Its combination of political power, architectural daring, cultural sophistication, and religious centrality had embedded it deeply into human consciousness. Even diminished, Babylon's presence was palpable. The city exerted a gravitational pull on imagination, compelling rulers, scholars, and storytellers to visit, describe, and contemplate it. By the first millennium CE, Babylon was largely abandoned, its population dispersed, its once thriving markets empty, its canals dry or silted. Yet it remained physically impressive enough to leave a lasting impression on those who encountered it. Writers like Strabo, Pliny, and later Arab geographers documented its ruins, marveling at its size, grandeur, and the audacity of its construction, often framing their descriptions as moral lessons about human pride and divine favor. Babylon had become a mirror through which successive generations assessed themselves, measuring ambition against mortality, the ephemeral against the enduring. And in the long shadow of time, the city's legend grew even more powerful than its physical form. While the stones crumbled and sand reclaimed the streets, the stories of kings, ziggurats, temples, and canals persisted, passed down through oral tradition, scripture, and historical accounts, ensuring that Babylon's influence would transcend its physical demise. In this sense, the city's immortality was secured. It had become a touchstone of human civilization, a lens through which the complexities of empire, religion, ambition, and decline could be understood. The ruins themselves, buried beneath centuries of silt and sand, remain an archaeological testament to the ingenuity, ambition, and enduring cultural influence of a city that truly touched the sky, not simply in height, but in its capacity to imprint upon history, imagination, and the human soul. Babylon, in its decay, remains alive, a city of contradictions, of lessons written in stone and legend alike, its shadow extending far beyond the banks of the Euphrates, across empires, centuries, and continents, shaping how humanity conceives of civilization, power, and the inexorable passage of time.
By the time the Islamic caliphates began to consolidate power across Mesopotamia in the 7th century CE, Babylon had long ceased to be a living political capital. Its canals choked, its streets partially buried beneath centuries of wind-blown sand, its temples and palaces fallen into ruin, yet its memory remained as vivid and potent as ever, etched into the consciousness of rulers, travelers, and scholars alike, who could not pass the ruins without marveling at the scale, ambition, and ingenuity of a civilization that had once reigned supreme over the Fertile Crescent. For centuries, Babylon had been both a physical city and a symbolic force, a touchstone for understanding human achievement and hubris, a monument to the ambition of kings who sought to touch the heavens and the dangers of assuming that human constructs could endure beyond the lifespan of those who built them. And as new empires rose, Persian, Greek, Parthian, Roman, and later Arab, the story of Babylon continued to inform governance, architecture, and religious imagination, for even diminished, the city exerted cultural authority far beyond its population or territorial reach. Travelers and chroniclers from distant lands continued to describe the ruins with awe and fear, noting walls wide enough for chariots, gates in vivid glazed brick adorned with lions and dragons, and temples whose foundations hinted at rituals that had once connected the earthly and divine, a network of belief and political authority so sophisticated that it continued to inspire admiration for millennia. Babylon had become a template for empire, a cautionary tale, and a symbol all at once. And as Islamic geographers and historians documented its remnants, they preserved for posterity not only the physical traces of the city, but also its place in human imagination, a city whose story transcended stone and mortar, reaching into moral, philosophical, and theological reflection, a city whose grandeur could be reconstructed in the mind even when its bricks lay shattered beneath centuries of sediment. During this period, the Euphrates continued to shape the landscape, its shifting course gradually transforming the geography of the region and altering access to Babylon. Yet the city's aura persisted, for knowledge of its past achievements, the precision of its canals, the height of its walls, the monumental scale of the Etemenanki, the grandeur of the processional way, was transmitted through manuscripts, oral tradition, and religious texts, ensuring that successive generations understood Babylon as both a historical reality and a symbol of the human relationship with power, faith, and mortality. Even as new cities like Baghdad, Ctesiphon, and Mosul emerged as centers of administration, commerce, and culture, Babylon's ruins stood as a silent teacher, a reminder that no matter how immense, a city's endurance depends on both its physical maintenance and the coherence of the society that sustains it, and that even the most carefully ordered civilization can crumble if human ambition outpaces wisdom or divine favor, as the Babylonians themselves had once believed. In this liminal state between decay and memory, Babylon influenced not only political thought but also architecture, as rulers sought to emulate its walls, gates, and urban planning, and scholars studied its inscriptions, mathematics, and astronomical records, recognizing in its systems a level of sophistication that rivaled any contemporary knowledge, a precision that informed calendars, engineering, and scientific inquiry for centuries, demonstrating that while cities may fall, the intellectual and cultural innovations they produce can endure far longer than their physical forms, and that the legacy of human ingenuity is inseparable from the memory of those who first conceived it.
By the medieval period, as scholars across the Islamic world compiled histories of Mesopotamia and the Near East, Babylon had been elevated in narrative importance beyond its physical significance, becoming a repository for stories of divine judgment, imperial ambition, and the fragility of worldly power. A city whose history was repeatedly interpreted and reinterpreted to serve as a mirror for the moral and political concerns of new societies. And through this process, Babylon's influence extended even further, shaping perceptions of empire, governance, and civilization across the Middle East, North Africa, and beyond, embedding itself into a shared cultural memory that transcended languages, religions, and dynasties. European travelers and historians who began visiting the region in the late medieval and early modern periods encountered the ruins and were confronted with the tangible scale of Babylon's past achievement. The size of its walls, the remnants of gates that had once been adorned with colored bricks and reliefs, the foundations of palaces and temples, and the outline of the processional way stretching toward the horizon, evidence that the city had been planned, built, and maintained at an ambition far beyond ordinary comprehension. These observations spark renewed interest in the city's history, inspiring research, art, and speculation about the capabilities of ancient civilizations, and in doing so, reinforced the notion that Babylon was not merely a historical curiosity, but a cultural benchmark, a standard against which human ingenuity and the dangers of overreach could be measured. The stories of Babylon's kings, Nebuchadnezzar, Nabonidus, Belshazzar, and their monumental achievements became intertwined with biblical and classical accounts, giving the city a dual identity as both a historical actor and a mythic symbol. And this duality ensured that Babylon continued to influence political, religious, and cultural thought long after its population had declined and its physical structures had largely fallen into ruin. Rulers in distant lands studied its successes and failures, architects borrowed from its designs, and theologians reflected on its moral lessons, demonstrating that Babylon's significance extended far beyond the limits of the Euphrates floodplain, becoming a city whose shadow stretched across continents and centuries. Archaeologists and historians in the modern era would later uncover layers of the city's complex history, revealing the sophistication of its urban planning, its water management systems, its monumental architecture, and its role as a hub of commerce, culture, and science, confirming that the legends, while often exaggerated, were grounded in a reality of remarkable achievement. The inscriptions, tablets, and ruins revealed a society capable of managing immense human and material resources, integrating conquest and administration, religion and governance, and demonstrating the remarkable capacity of ancient civilizations to combine technical skill, organizational acumen, and cultural imagination. Babylon's long shadow extended even further through its representation in literature and art across centuries. European writers, poets, and painters from the Renaissance onward depicted Babylon as both marvel and warning, a city that embodied the heights of human aspiration and the peril of hubris, and in doing so reinforced the symbolic power, ensuring that even as the bricks crumbled and the streets disappeared beneath sand, Babylon would continue to shape human thought about empire, ambition, faith, and mortality. In this way, the city became immortal, not through continued habitation or political dominance, but through memory, representation, and influence, a force that guided rulers, inspired scholars, and haunted the imagination of countless civilizations across time. The city's ruins, its inscriptions, its myths, and its legacy became a perpetual reference point for understanding the interplay of power, culture, and divine favor, a testament to the enduring significance of a city that had truly touched the sky and refused to disappear entirely, even as the centuries pressed inexorably forward, reclaiming stone, mortar, and memory alike, leaving behind a narrative that continues to shape human understanding of the rise and fall of civilizations, the fragility of empire, and the enduring power of history itself. A story that is simultaneously cautionary, inspiring, and timeless, ensuring that Babylon's shadow continues to loom over the landscape of human imagination as both a warning and a beacon, a testament to ambition, ingenuity, resilience, and the inexorable passage of time.
Babylon, in the end, exists less as a city of bricks and canals than as a monument to human imagination, ambition, and the inexorable passage of time,
a place where the physical and symbolic intertwine so completely that to speak of its fall is to confront the paradox of endurance within decay. For even as sand and silt claimed its streets, and as centuries of neglect, flood, and conquest reduced its temples, walls, and towers to ruin, the city persisted in memory, in myth, and in the consciousness of civilizations yet to come, echoing across the centuries as a cautionary tale, a symbol of ambition, and a repository of knowledge that would shape rulers, scholars, and dreamers alike. In the centuries following the Islamic conquest of Mesopotamia, Babylon remained a place of pilgrimage for the curious, the scholarly, and the devout, drawing travelers from Persia, Arabia, the Mediterranean, and beyond, all of whom marveled at the scale and sophistication of what remained, attempting to reconcile the grandeur of legend with the fragmentary evidence of ruin. Walking along crumbling walls and gazing at the foundations of palaces and temples where the faded imprint of lions and dragons still whispered of the city's ceremonial and martial past, and where the remnants of the Etemenanki, the Tower of Babel itself, reached toward the sky in skeletal form, a reminder of humanity's desire to ascend to the heavens and of the humility imposed by time, mortality, and the relentless forces of nature. Scholars of the medieval and early modern periods meticulously recorded Babylon's remains, translating inscriptions, sketching gates, and preserving oral accounts, ensuring that knowledge of the city's layout, engineering, and cultural practices endured long after habitation had dwindled. And their efforts allowed the world to understand not just the physical magnitude of Babylon, but the intellectual, religious, and administrative sophistication that had enabled it to dominate the ancient Near East, orchestrating vast trade networks, coordinating irrigation systems that fed hundreds of thousands, and managing a bureaucracy capable of sustaining a complex empire, while simultaneously fostering monumental architecture and elaborate ceremonial life, all of which underscored the extraordinary ambition and ingenuity of the civilization that had created it. Yet for all its administrative brilliance and architectural daring, Babylon's ultimate lesson was moral and existential, a reminder that even the mightiest human achievement is vulnerable to complacency, internal division, and the inexorable flow of history, as demonstrated by the failures of kings like Nabonidus, whose religious devotion alienated powerful priesthoods, or Belshazzar, whose detachment and indulgence exemplified the peril of ruling without attention to the gods or the governed, and whose reign ended in quiet surrender rather than spectacular conquest, illustrating that empires do not always fall in the violence we expect, but often in silence, through the subtle erosion of legitimacy, authority, and confidence, a process far more effective and enduring than any army could achieve, and one that allowed Cyrus the Great to claim the city without siege, orchestrating a transfer of power so precise, so psychologically informed, that Babylon's people themselves welcomed a new ruler, interpreting his arrival as divine approval and cementing the city's place not only in the political order of the Persian Empire, but also in the moral and cosmic imagination of the ancient world. After Cyrus, Babylon continued to adapt and endure under successive empires, Seleucid, Parthian, Roman, and Arab, not as the center of conquest, but as a repository of knowledge, culture, and memory, a place where mathematics, astronomy, and ritual practice survived even as political influence faded, and where the grandeur of monuments and the scale of urban planning continued to inspire awe, demonstrating that power can outlast authority when embedded in culture and intellect, and that the legacy of a city can shape civilizations long after the last ruler has passed, the last brick has fallen, and the Euphrates has shifted its course away from the canals that once sustained life within the walls. In parallel with this physical endurance, Babylon's symbolic resonance expanded, embedding itself deeply in religious, literary, and philosophical traditions across the world. Jewish scriptures depicted it as a symbol of hubris and divine judgment. Greek and Roman authors recounted its monumental architecture and luxury. Medieval Islamic scholars preserved its history and astronomy, and Renaissance thinkers and travelers interpreted its ruins as evidence of human ingenuity and moral instruction, ensuring that Babylon remained relevant even as its physical presence diminished, a city whose story transcended time, geography, and culture, teaching that ambition untempered by wisdom carries consequences, that civilization is fragile, yet that human creativity and knowledge can endure long after the collapse of political authority. The ruins themselves, now largely archaeological sites, bear witness to this dual legacy. Immense walls, scattered foundations, remnants of palaces and temples, the faint outlines of the processional way, and traces of canals all speak to the extraordinary human effort invested in creating a city designed to last forever, while the slow encroachment of sand, sediment, and neglect reminds observers that permanence is an illusion, and that even the grandest structures are subject to entropy and time, a tension mirrored in the narratives that have surrounded Babylon for millennia, where legend and history intertwine, and where the moral, intellectual, and cultural achievements of the city continue to resonate as profoundly as their material remains. In reflecting on Babylon, one confronts not only the story of a single city, but also a meditation on the rise and fall of empires, the fleeting nature of political power, and the enduring force of culture, intellect, and imagination, realizing that the city's true monument is neither wall nor tower, neither gate nor palace, but the memory it has imprinted upon humanity, a memory so potent that it has guided rulers, inspired architects, informed scientists, and haunted poets for thousands of years, a city whose reach stretches across continents and centuries, reminding all who encounter its story that ambition can reach the skies, yet mortality and history ultimately shape destiny, and that even in ruin, a city can teach, inspire, and endure. Today, Babylon exists as a layered landscape of archaeology, scholarship, and imagination, where researchers uncover cuneiform tablets, reconstruct ziggurats, and map streets that have been buried for millennia, piecing together a narrative that reveals the scope of its civilization, the depth of its intellectual achievements, and the complexity of its social, political, and religious systems. Yet even as each discovery illuminates the past, it also highlights the impermanence of human constructs, the fragility of empire, and the extraordinary resilience of memory and culture, a tension that defines Babylon's enduring legacy and ensures that the city, though physically diminished, continues to touch the sky in the minds and hearts of all who study and imagine it. And in this, Babylon achieves an immortality greater than any ziggurat could grant, a triumph of legacy over ruin, of story over sand, of human ambition over time. And thus the city that once rose above the Euphrates, commanding gods and kings alike, lives eternally, a testament to both the grandeur and fragility of civilization, a final lesson in what it means to build, to dream, and to endure, ensuring that Babylon's name, his history, and its shadow will remain forever woven into the human story, a city whose reach is limitless, whose voice echoes across millennia, and whose spirit touches the sky even as the centuries roll on.